We covered the bogus takedown of Backpage when it happened. This is the classified ads site that was taken down in direct violation of Section 230 because sex workers were advertising their services on the site. Under the law, since Backpage didn't create the content, they shouldn't be held liable, particularly since they had millions of users and no real way of policing it. They had automated tools that could find and delete such ads, but the sex workers began talking in code in a way the systems couldn't detect. They kept claiming that the prostitution on the site was sex trafficking, even though it was the best way the sex workers had of avoiding sex trafficking, since they could operate safely without a pimp and do background checks on their johns. They even claimed that children were being trafficked with no evidence whatsoever. And this was taken down before the passage of Sesta Fosta, the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act and Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, so it's also a violation of the Constitution's ex post facto prohibition. It even had the opposite effect of the one they claimed. Crimes related to pimping and sex trafficking, including violence against sex workers, tripled the year Backpage was taken down. And law enforcement was making fewer arrests because Backpage was a good investigatory tool for them. And far from enabling sex trafficking, Backpage actively worked with law enforcement to identify culprits and victims. At the time, Pike Long, deputy director of St. James Infirmary, a clinic for sex workers in San Francisco, said, "Without being able to advertise online, a huge number of sex workers were forced to go outside, and many have reported that former pimps came out of the woodwork offering to manage their business again since they were now rendered unable to find and screen clients online. The very bill that was supposed to stop trafficking has quite literally given formerly irrelevant traffickers new life." They arrested Backpage founders Michael Lacey and James Larkin, as well as several executives, in what ended up being a laughably absurd prosecution. They were charged with facilitating prostitution and money laundering. Charges of pimping and conspiracy had already been thrown out. But prosecutors just couldn't stop talking about child sex trafficking when they weren't even charged with that. But if you've got a losing case, gotta work the children in there somehow. They had also managed to get a lot of exculpatory evidence declared inadmissible, including internal memos from investigators who acknowledged that they always knew that no children were being trafficked via the site, despite their public statements to the contrary, and that they were, in their words, remarkably responsive to law enforcement requests and often takes proactive steps to assist in investigations. U.S. District Judge Susan Brnovich had given them some leeway to introduce evidence of people trafficked via the site. But the government abused that leeway, with government witnesses introducing emotional and prejudicial details that have nothing to do with presenting evidence. She shut them down, saying it wasn't the job of prosecutors to win at all costs. So now that you're caught up with the story as this channel has been covering it, the mistrial that was declared due to prosecutorial misconduct should have been the end of it, because of the Fifth Amendment's prohibition of double jeopardy. But as this week's quickie shows in an unrelated case, judges just love finding ways around that. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said that this ridiculous case can move on because the mistrial doesn't count as double jeopardy. Lacey said, "No one is the least surprised by the Ninth Circuit ruling. We have always believed we must rely upon jurors, not judges, for a fair shake. And so, to trial." 2023 will mean the 6th year of this bogus trial and them continuing to have to wear ankle monitors. Lacey said, "They are a constant reminder of captivity. When they go off, they are loud and startle people in restaurants, supermarkets, retail outlets." So they're also being denied their Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial. Prosecutors couldn't stop talking about child sex trafficking, a crime the defendants in this case are not charged with, and U.S. District Judge Susan M. Brnovich declared a mistrial. So they filed a motion to dismiss, arguing double jeopardy. A district judge dismissed it in December, and that was when they appealed to the Ninth Circuit. The 3-judge panel said that the Constitution's prohibition on double jeopardy only applies when a mistrial stems from prosecutorial conduct intended to goad defendants into moving for a mistrial. Funny, my copy of the Constitution doesn't seem to have that part in it. It does not apply if a mistrial was declared because of impermissible conduct intended to help the state win. But when the government uses underhanded tactics like this to win, it means they already know they have a losing case. Otherwise, they got to the forum where they get to present their evidence, and if even they weren't sure they'd prevail on the merits, what reason is there to go any further? At any rate, Lacey and Larkin had argued the prosecutors did want them to ask for a mistrial, as the first few days of the trial were not making the government's case look good. The Ninth Circuit judges rejected this argument, writing that the government's case in chief was still in its infancy when the Backpage defendants asked for a mistrial. That's dumb when you know how trials work. By the time the trial begins, all of the evidence is in, having been accepted or excluded in pretrial motions. Even if it hadn't been presented yet, they knew what kind of case they had. And it went south quickly. California caught Brian Fitchner, who had investigated Backpage for then California Attorney General Kamala Harris, was their lead witness, and cross-examination did not go well. He admitted during cross that he couldn't tell if any of the ads were illegal just by looking at them, and no arrest was ever made on an ad alone, despite the prosecution's claim that anyone could tell just by looking the ads were illegal. And this is one of many reasons for the prohibition of double jeopardy. They shouldn't be allowed to be prepared for cross-examinations like that. The second bite at the apple means they'll know to try to evade that point at the next trial. But they allowed it since, at minimum, the government still had a clear path to prevailing at trial and had no reason to sabotage its own trial. Even though the only reason to do crap like bring up child sex trafficking, which has nothing to do with the case, is because they know they're gonna lose otherwise. So this prosecution and persecution can continue. And remember, the process is the punishment. They've basically been on parole for 6 years, having to get permission to go places and wearing ankle monitors everywhere. They've had their movements completely restricted, even though they're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. And that's another dirty tactic. When you know you have a losing case, draw things out as long as possible. That's why we have a right to a speedy trial. When the government tries to cheat in order to win, the proper course is a mistrial, and double jeopardy should absolutely apply, because the government was given a chance to present its evidence, and they chose antics instead. There is nothing resembling good faith here. So, comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne, please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and go to donate.bogosity.tv for lots of ways to support this channel, including becoming a supporter on Patreon or Subscribestar, where you can get all my videos early and ad-free. Until next time, stay strong and be free.